The small brass bell above the door gave a soft chime as Michael Reeves stepped into the diner just before dusk. A thin wind followed him in, carrying the scent of rain-damp wood and the cooling breath of late autumn. Inside, the place smelled of toasted bread and dark roast coffee, quiet, dim, unassuming. It wasn't the kind of place he usually went, to note the kind where hedge fund managers shook hands or board members toasted to another merger. But tonight wasn't about any of that. It was about her. His daughter, Ellie, sat silently beside him in her wheelchair, her small body wrapped in a pale gray coat. Her hands rested limply in her lap. Her eyes didn't move to take in the room. She didn't look at the menu. She didn't speak. She hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. Since the accident, Michael's throat tightened as he walked with her to the booth in the back, guided by a teenage hostess who barely met his eyes. He didn't blame her. Ellie drew discomfort in others, like shadows, draw dusk, quiet and unexplainable. As he settled into the booth across from his daughter, he picked up the menu out of habit, not hunger. His eyes scanned the page, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He looked at Ellie instead. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently. No reply. There never was. He set the menu down and exhaled, rubbing a hand over the back of his neck. The silence was thick, not peaceful, but hollow. In meetings, Michael could command a room of 50 with a single word. But here, with the one person who mattered most, he was voiceless. A soft voice broke through. "Hi there, I'm Rachel, and I'll be your server tonight." She was young, probably late 20s, her apron slightly wrinkled, a faint smudge of flour on her sleeve. Her brown hair was tied back with a red string, tired eyes, but not unkind. Michael looked up. "Grilled chicken sandwich for me, and for my daughter. Something soft. Maybe a soup?" Rachel glanced at Ellie. Something flickered in her expression, not pity, but a kind of noticing. "We have creamy potato soup. No onions. It's easy on the stomach." Michael nodded. "That'll be fine. I'll bring it right out," she said, then turned without asking further questions. When she was gone, Michael glanced at Ellie again. He reached for his phone and flicked through a few emails. Meetings rescheduled. Numbers rising. Numbers falling. None of it mattered tonight. Would she eat? Would she even look up? Minutes later, Rachel returned with 2-plate chicken sandwich for him, the soup set gently before Ellie. She placed a spoon beside the bowl, her movements slow, as if trying not to disturb the silence at their table. "Let me know if you need anything else," she said, then left. Michael picked up the spoon, paused for a moment, then carefully dipped it into the soup. "Okay, sweetheart," he murmured, "just a little." He brought the spoon close to Ellie's lips. Her hand jerked suddenly. The spoon clattered against the edge of the table, broth splattering across the white cloth. A few nearby customers turned their heads. Michael clenched his jaw, not in anger, never at her, but in helplessness. He picked up the spoon again, slower this time. "Please, Ellie." Still no response. She sat perfectly still, staring downward, one hand gripping the hem of her coat. Michael set the spoon down and leaned back, rubbing his temples. He didn't notice the footsteps until they stopped beside him. "May I?" It was Rachel. She wasn't holding a tray. She wasn't rushing. She was kneeling beside Ellie's wheelchair now, her voice quieter than before. Michael blinked. "What?" She nodded toward the spoon. "May I try?" He hesitated. Normally, he would have said no. Ellie wasn't a case study. She wasn't a charity story. He'd hired professional speech therapists, behavioral specialists, neurologists from New York to San Francisco. None had gotten through. But something about the woman kneeling beside his daughter felt different. Her voice wasn't clinical. Her presence wasn't calculated. He handed her the spoon without a word. Rachel didn't speak at first. She simply dipped the spoon into the soup again, lifted it gently, and said softly, as though to an old friend, "When I was little," she said, "my grandmother used to tell me that soup is just a warm hug in a bowl." She didn't push the spoon forward. She waited. Ellie didn't move. Not at first. Then her fingers twitched. Michael noticed it immediately. He had learned to watch for the smallest things. Rachel smiled. Just one sip, okay? Just one hug. She brought the spoon toward Ellie's lips. This time, Ellie didn't pull away. The broth touched her mouth. She paused, then swallowed. Michael sat frozen. It was just one sip. But for a child who hadn't willingly eaten in nearly a year, it was everything. Then Ellie looked up, not past Rachel, at her, and smiled. Michael hadn't seen that smile since his wife died. And in that quiet corner of a forgettable diner, something he thought long dead stirred faintly in his chest. Hope. Michael couldn't sleep that night. The city outside his penthouse window blinked with 1,000 artificial stars offices, still lit, traffic crawling endlessly, but inside his study, everything was still, except for him. He sat in his leather chair, one hand loosely holding a glass of untouched bourbon, the other running slowly through his hair. The image wouldn't leave him. Rachel, kneeling beside Ellie like she wasn't broken, like she wasn't a puzzle to be solved. And Ellie, smiling. A smile. It had been 3 years, not even a flicker of joy, not even a ghost of expression. And then this waitress, this stranger, had done what doctors and therapists and specialists could not. He didn't understand it, and Michael Reeves hated what he didn't understand. He pulled his phone closer and tapped in a number. It rang once before his assistant answered. "Yes, Mr. Reeves? Find out everything you can about a woman named Rachel Carr, mid to late 20s, works at a diner on 8th and Lawson." A pause. "Anything in particular I'm looking for?" "Everything." The next evening, Michael returned to the diner. It was quieter than the night before. A few tables were occupied. A child in the corner laughed, while her mother tried to cut pancakes into shapes. The smell of grease and old vinyl clung to the air. He didn't come with Ellie this time. Rachel was wiping down a counter when she spotted him. Her eyes narrowed not with anger, but with caution. She set her cloth aside as he approached. "Mr. Reeves." "Rachel, you're back. I need to talk to you," he said. She glanced toward the open kitchen, where a man in a stained apron gave her a quick thumbs up. Then she looked back at Michael. "I'm working." "It won't take long." She let out a sigh. "Fine, 2 minutes." She gestured toward the service hallway beside the restrooms. He followed. The space was narrow, fluorescent lit, lined with plastic bins and old menus. Rachel folded her arms, leaning against a wall. "You were incredible with Ellie," Michael said. She looked surprised. "I didn't do anything special." "You did more in 1 minute than 10 professionals did in 3 years." Rachel said nothing. "You've worked with children like her before, haven't you?" Her jaw tensed. "I used to babysit." He looked her in the eye. "You're lying." Silence. Then Rachel's voice turned flat. "Look, I don't know what this is, but whatever you think I am." "I know you studied special education," Michael interrupted. "Top of your class at UCLA. You dropped out in your final year. Disappeared." Rachel stared at him. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. "I do my homework," he added quietly. "Then, you also know I'm not interested in doing that anymore," she said. "Why not?" She shook her head. "Because I have tables to serve. Good night, Mr. Reeves." She turned, but he stepped forward, not blocking, not forceful, just there. "I'm offering you a job." She laughed once. No humor in it. "Doing what? Being your daughter's project? Being the one person she trusts." She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment, something flickered behind her eyes. Pain, fear, regret, maybe all three. "I can't," she said, finally, voice tight. "Why?" Her gaze dropped to the floor. "I just can't." And then she walked away. Michael didn't go home right away. He drove, past lights, past street signs, past the same park bench where he once pushed Ellie on the swings when she still laughed without restraint. Back then, life was easier, simpler, whole. Rachel Carr wasn't just a waitress. He knew that now. And whatever she was running from, it wasn't just about a career she had walked away from. It was something else. something deeper. And Michael Reeves, for the first time in a long time, found himself needing to understand, not out of curiosity or control, but because for the first time in 3 years, his daughter had smiled. Michael didn't rest until he found it. Buried in an old obituary from a small-town newspaper in Oregon, just a few lines tucked between church announcements and weekend yard sales. Caleb Carr, age 10, passed away unexpectedly. Beloved son, cherished brother. There was no mention of a cause of death, no details, just a grainy photograph of a boy with bright eyes and crooked teeth, his smile lopsided, full of mischief. Michael stared at the screen for a long time. Carr, Rachel Carr. She hadn't just studied special education, she had lived it. The pieces slid into place with a sickening click. He returned to the diner again. It was nearly closing time. The place was half-cleaned, chairs stacked, music lowered to a faint hum. Rachel was behind the counter, arms elbow-deep in a sink of soapy water. Her back straightened the moment she saw him. "No," she said, not unkindly, not angrily, just tired. "Please," Michael replied. "Whatever you think you know. I know about Caleb." She froze. Slowly, Rachel turned to face him, her hands still dripping, eyes wide, vulnerable. Michael took a step closer. "I know he was your brother. I know he had cerebral palsy. I know he died, and I know that you disappeared after that." Rachel's shoulders curled slightly inward, like something heavy had returned to rest there. "You had no right," she said, her voice barely audible. "I needed to know," he said softly, "because you walked away from something you were born to do, and you're the only person who's ever reached my daughter." Silence. Rachel wiped her hands on her apron, more to keep them busy than anything else. Then she exhaled, the kind of breath people hold in for years. "He was everything," she said finally. Michael waited. "My parents were never really there," she continued, her voice detached, like she was reading someone else's story. "So it was just me and him. I did the feedings, the therapy, the sleepless nights. I memorized every sound he made, every shift in his breathing. I promised him I'd always be there." Her throat worked hard, like she was trying to swallow something solid. "And one night he got a fever. We didn't think it was serious. It never was before. But then it got worse, and 2 didn't act fast enough. I thought I had more time." She looked down, as if ashamed of the words. "By the time we got to the hospital, it was too late." Michael didn't speak. "I was in school to help kids like him," she said bitterly. "And when it mattered, I failed. I failed the one child who trusted me the most." She turned away. "So, no, I don't do that anymore. I don't get close, because if I lose someone again..." Her voice cracked. Michael's heart ached not from pity, but from recognition. The look in her eyes mirrored the one he saw every night in his own reflection. The unbearable fear of failing someone you love. "You didn't fail him," Michael said gently. But she shook her head, already retreating. "I did." And she disappeared into the back of the diner before he could say another word. For the first time in his life, Michael Reeves didn't have an answer. He didn't have a strategy. He didn't have a plan. But he knew one thing. He wasn't done. Because that woman haunted and guarded as she Washad made his daughter smile. And somewhere behind the grief and guilt she carried like armor, there was someone still capable of doing beautiful, quiet miracles. Rachel hadn't meant to say yes. When Michael knocked on the back door of the diner the next evening after hours, after closing, when the streets were dark and the air had turned cold, she opened the door with every intention of sending him away again. But he didn't bring an offer. He brought Ellie, wrapped in a blue scarf, hands tucked into the sleeves of her coat, her wheelchair still slightly too big for her frame. Her eyes were tired, her head tilted gently to one side. Michael's voice was quiet. "1 week, just try." Rachel didn't speak. She looked at Ellie, and Ellie looked back. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. Something passed between them. Not recognition, not trust, but maybe something even smaller. possibility. And against every part of her that wanted to run against the guilt and the ghosts and the hard-earned caution, she said, 1 week. The Reeves estate wasn't a house. It was an expanse. A long driveway, high iron gates, stone pillars older than Ellie herself. Inside, the ceiling stretched like cathedral walls. The windows swallowed light and softened it. Rachel stood in the foyer holding her single canvas bag, feeling completely out of place. She looked down at her worn sneakers and already wished she had worn different shoes. Michael didn't notice. "This way," he said, leading her down a quiet hallway, lined with photographs that all stopped 3 years ago. The door to Ellie's room stood ajar. Rachel stepped inside. Soft colors, pale lavender walls, a shelf full of untouched books, a rocking chair that looked unused. And in the middle of it all, the small girl sat still, her back to the window, her face turned away. "She's been quieter lately," Michael said from behind, "since her mother." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Rachel nodded once. "I'll start tomorrow," she said. The first 2 days were nearly silent. Rachel didn't push. She didn't ask Ellie to speak. She didn't coax her to eat. She didn't try to fix anything. She was just there. She read books aloud, not babyish ones, not overperformed, just soft, steady reading. She sat beside Ellie's chair and sometimes told her about the weather, about the cat that lived in the alley behind the diner, about the time she spilled lemonade on her principal's shoes in 3rd grade. No response. Until day 3. Rachel had just finished reading a paragraph from a book about birds, something Ellie probably didn't care about, when she noticed something. A soft tapping. She looked down. Ellie's fingers tapping the side of the chair. In rhythm, in time with the words. Rachel stopped. "You like that one?" she asked, barely above a whisper. The tapping stopped, then started again. She didn't smile, not outwardly, but something flickered inside her like a lantern lit too quickly. Small, faint, but alive. That night, Rachel stayed a little later than planned. She tucked Ellie in gently, smoothing the blankets over her legs. The child didn't resist, didn't reach for her either, but she didn't turn away. Rachel stood beside the bed, frozen for a moment. Then she sat, slowly, and sang, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray." Her voice cracked halfway through. She hadn't sung that song in years, not since Caleb, not since the night in the hospital, when it was the last thing he heard before everything went silent. Her hands trembled, but she finished the verse. Ellie didn't speak, but she reached just barely and curled her fingers around the edge of the blanket. Outside the doorway, Michael stood, watching through a narrow crack. He hadn't meant to listen, but he did. And for the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel like a stranger in his own home. He felt something else, like maybe he was starting to find his way back. The changes were subtle at first. Ellie still didn't speak, but she began to notice things. Her head turned slightly when Rachel entered the room. Her eyes lingered longer on the pages of the books. During stretching exercises, she no longer flinched when Rachel touched her arms. It wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, private. But in that stillness, something was growing. Michael watched it all unfold from the edges. At first, he told himself he was simply observing, making sure it was worth it. That the experiment, if that's what this was, wasn't just another false dawn. But then one morning, Rachel handed Ellie a block with a soft, "Here you go, sweetheart," and Ellie reached for it. Not immediately, not confidently, but she reached. And Michael exhaled, like he hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He stepped forward, sat beside them. Rachel didn't look surprised. She didn't say anything at all. She simply shifted slightly, creating space for him to join. Ellie didn't resist. Later that afternoon, as Rachel helped Ellie balance a crayon between her fingers, Michael spoke. "You don't have to be here all day," he said. Rachel looked up. "I know. Why are you?" She didn't answer at first. She adjusted Ellie's hand slightly, helping guide the soft stroke of red across the page. Then quietly, "Because she matters." Michael watched the crayon move, slow and uneven, but real. "I should have been here sooner." Rachel looked at him, and for the first time, there was no wall in her eyes. "No one teaches you how to lose someone," she said, "but no one tells you how to stay either. That part's harder." Michael said nothing. That night, Ellie fell asleep with her hand resting in Rachel's. Her breathing was steady. No restless tossing. No haunted whimpers. Rachel didn't move. Neither did Michael, sitting in the corner of the room watching his daughter sleep like he hadn't seen her sleep in 3 years. Days turned into a rhythm. Michael began joining more often. Not as a bystander, but as a participant. He sat in on reading time. He helped roll out Play-Doh, clumsily shaping stars and dogs and unrecognizable blobs that made Ellie giggle softly, her first audible sound since that evening in the diner. He even tried singing once. Rachel didn't laugh, though she clearly wanted to. Ellie liked it. That was what mattered. Michael found himself laughing more, too. Not the stiff, professional kind, but real laughter, the kind that didn't ask permission. Rachel noticed. "You're not what I expected," she said one evening as they watched the sun set behind the back garden. Ellie had fallen asleep again, her small body relaxed in a beanbag chair beside them. Michael raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" She sipped her tea. Suits, silence, guilt. He gave a small shrug. "I have all three. Just learning to wear them differently." Rachel smiled, not out of amusement, out of understanding. "You're doing better than you think." He looked at her. "So are you." The words lingered. Michael didn't say what he was thinking. That he hadn't seen anyone bring light into a room since his wife died. That Rachel's voice calmed more than just Ellie. That her presence in the house didn't just fill silence, it healed it. But he didn't say any of that. Not yet. Instead, he stood, reached down, and helped her to her feet. Their fingers touched, briefly, barely. But for both of them it was enough to know they had felt something. Something they hadn't expected. Something they were both afraid to name. Rachel wasn't sure when it started to feel like home. Maybe it was the third time Ellie reached for her hand unprompted. Maybe it was when she caught Michael humming under his breath while making tea. Or maybe it was the night Ellie fell asleep on her lap and Michael brought her a blanket without saying a word. Whatever the moment was, it came quietly, like most meaningful things do. She'd promised herself she wouldn't let this happen. She'd told herself this was just 1 week, a chance to help, nothing more. But the problem with building walls around your heart is that eventually, someone kind enough will sit beside them. And Rachel was starting to realize that Michael wasn't just kind. He was present. He noticed when she skipped dinner. He waited until Ellie was asleep before asking her how her day was. And when she couldn't answer, when the words caught in her throat didn't push. He just sat with her. That was the thing about grief, she thought. It didn't need solving. It just needed witnessing. One evening, as the sky turned orange outside the patio windows, they sat together again. Ellie was asleep on the couch, surrounded by soft pillows and a half-read picture book. Rachel sipped her tea. Michael sat beside her, quieter than usual. "She's changing," he said. Rachel nodded. "So are you." He looked at her, but she didn't meet his eyes. "I was afraid," he said. "Still am." "Of what?" "Of not being enough. Of loving someone again. Of losing them." Rachel swallowed. She didn't have to ask who the meant. "Same," she whispered. He reached out, slowly. His hand brushed hers on the armrest. She didn't move. "Rachel," he said, voice low. She looked up. He kissed her. It wasn't dramatic or urgent, just a quiet moment, the meeting of two people who had spent too long in the dark. His lips were warm, and his hand was steady against her cheek. She didn't pull away. Until she did. Abrupt, breathless. She stood too fast, her chair scraping against the stone floor. "I can't." Michael blinked. "Rachel, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." We shouldn't have. You didn't do anything wrong. I let it happen. Her voice was unraveling, a thread coming loose at the edges. I thought I could do this, but I can't. Michael stood now, too, his expression clouded. Can't do what? This. Any of it. Be here. Be with her, with you. Rachel backed away. Her hands trembled at her sides. I care about her too much, she said, voice breaking, and I'm terrified. Terrified of what? She didn't answer. Because she didn't need to. The answer was written all over her face. Of loving. Of staying. Of losing again. She turned and left the room without looking back. And Michael didn't follow. He couldn't. The house was quieter without her. Not a peaceful kind of quiet, but a missing kind. A quiet that lingered in doorways and drifted through the halls like dust no one bothered to sweep. Rachel left the next morning. No goodbyes. No explanation. Just a folded note on the kitchen counter. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have stayed this long. Michael read it 3 times. Then he crumpled it into his fist. Ellie noticed immediately. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But something in her posture changed. Shoulders hunched slightly inward, head lower, eyes dimmer. By the 3rd day, she had stopped eating again. Michael tried. He sat beside her with soup, with stories, with soft lullabies he barely remembered the words to. She wouldn't look at him. She wouldn't respond. He didn't blame her. Because she had lost someone again, and this time, he had let it happen. That night, he walked past her room and stopped. Ellie was curled on her side, facing the wall, her small body shaking in near silent sobs. He sat on the edge of her bed, gently placed a hand on her back. Sweetheart, he said softly, I'm here. She didn't move. Then, after a long silence, her voice came fragile, like paper held too long in the rain. Where's Rachel? Michael closed his eyes. He had no answer that would make sense to a 9-year-old, no excuse that would undo what had happened. She left, he said quietly, but not because of you. Ellie didn't speak again. She just turned her face into the pillow. The next morning, Michael sat in his office, the curtains still drawn, the light outside gray and indifferent. His phone buzzed. Emails, meetings, deals, waiting. He ignored them all. Because nothing mattered. Not when his daughter was fading again, not when he couldn't get the sound of her voice, where's Rachel, out of his head. He stood, grabbed his coat, and walked out. The diner was busy. Saturday morning, people hunched over coffee mugs, kids waving crayons, steam rising from plates of eggs and toast. Michael stepped inside with Ellie in his arms. Her face was pale, thinner than it had been weeks ago, but her eyes moved now, scanning, searching. And then they found her. Rachel stood behind the counter, hair tied back in a loose knot, sleeves rolled up, face tired. She froze when she saw them. The room kept moving around her, but she didn't move. Until Ellie lifted her hand. Just a few inches. Just enough. Rachel was around the counter in seconds. She knelt beside them, tears already gathering. Ellie, she whispered. The girl reached out, touched Rachel's cheek with trembling fingers. And Rachel broke. She pulled Ellie into her arms and held her like she might disappear again, like holding her was the only thing keeping the world from coming apart. Michael stood quietly beside them, his jaw tight. When Rachel finally looked up, he spoke. I need you. Her eyes searched his. I don't just need you for her, he continued, voice raw. I need you for me. Rachel didn't reply. Her arms stayed wrapped around Ellie. Her tears soaked into the girl's coat. And then something small happened. Ellie moved her hand, reached for the spoon on the nearby table. She gripped it unsteady, trembling, and brought it to her lips. A bite. Her first bite on her own. Rachel gasped. Michael's hand went to his heart. And Ellie looked up at them. She smiled. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed that night, her fingers gently smoothing the blanket over Ellie's legs. The child was already half asleep, her hand still holding on to Rachel's wrist like she didn't want to let go. Not tonight. Michael stood in the doorway, watching them. I was afraid, Rachel said softly, not turning around. So was I, he replied. The room fell into stillness. Not silence, not emptiness, but a quiet that felt earned. Rachel looked down at Ellie. I thought letting myself love again would destroy me. And it might, Michael said gently, stepping into the room, but not loving her, not loving you, already was. Rachel turned. Her eyes shimmered under the low lamplight. Michael reached into his pocket, pulling out something he'd been carrying for days. Small, velvet, weightless and heavy all at once. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. He simply stepped closer and opened his hand. I don't want to fix you, he said. You're not broken. Rachel swallowed. I don't want to rescue you. I just want to stand beside you. With her. With both of you. Every day. She looked down at the ring. Then at him. Then at Ellie who, though nearly asleep, murmured a sound like a sigh of recognition. A sigh that said, stay. Rachel exhaled a long breath she hadn't realized she was still holding. I don't want to run anymore, she whispered. Then don't. She took the ring. And his hand. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were still days when Ellie would retreat, when Rachel would wake from dreams that left her quiet for hours, when Michael would stare too long at the photo of his wife in the hall. But there were also mornings when Ellie laughed, full and free, when Rachel sang to her while baking muffins in the kitchen. When Michael read out loud with his daughter in his lap, and Rachel curled beside him, her head on his shoulder. There were small things, quiet things, shared glances, held hands, one spoon, one smile, one family, stitched together not by blood, not by perfection but by choice. A choice made over and over again. And sometimes, the families we choose, quietly, carefully are the ones that heal us the most.